First of all, I have to say it's a welcome change to be on stage somewhere for a change. It's been way too long staring into webcams, explaining things to maybe big audiences, maybe small audiences. At least I have a live audience here today, which is fantastic. My name is Ville Sointu. I am the head of emerging technologies for Nordea, also known as the best job in the bank or the worst job in the bank. Depends on who you ask. The best job is because I get to work with new technologies, all the new fancy things, and people don't complain too much when I go on stage and don't have a tie, which is of course a bonus. The worst job, of course, is when you struggle to gain momentum for your obviously brilliant new ideas you want to push forward, and you're trying to compete with the other initiatives in the bank. But today, I'm going to talk to you something that is positive and is definitely squarely in the first category of things for my job, and that is nothing more, nothing less than the fourth industrial revolution. I will try to explain today what the fourth industrial revolution, also known as Industry 4.0, is, why it is, and then more interestingly, from my job's perspective, what does it mean for banks? What does it mean for financial services going forward in the coming years? So let me start by explaining what does the 4.0 mean in this context. The 4.0, of course, refers to the fourth industrial revolution, but the first industrial revolution was the invention of the steam engine. This, of course, created a massive productivity growth in the industrial space and led on to the second industrial revolution, which was the invention of mass production. The third industrial revolution was the IT revolution that happened and allowed robots and computing to exist in the manufacturing space. The fourth industrial revolution is different from all of the previous industrial revolutions for two reasons. First, it is the first industrial revolution that has been predicted. It is also the first industrial revolution that is overdue. When all of these industrial revolutions happened earlier on, it resulted in a GDP growth that was fairly significant. At the moment, we're seeing in the manufacturing space, especially in the Eurozone, seeing a decline in GDP, and this fourth industrial revolution is expected to happen now and fix this growth problem that we have. The fourth revolution, of course, is about connectivity. It is about digitizing everything that happens in the production of goods in the industrial space and allows manufacturers to predict the operational capacity and demand of the production line. But before we actually dwell deeper into that, perhaps it's good to understand why this is now happening. And when we go there, we need to start from the personal space. Some call it the surveillance capitalism, some call it, Gartner calls it the internet of behavior. What it means is that everything we do today is somehow measured and put into data, and then somebody uses that data to create predictions of our personal lives. Everybody has seen one version of this happening to your lives when something pops up into your Facebook stream that you didn't really think that you actually shared with anybody. These predictions are made possible due to the abundance of data that is available for these companies when they mine your behavior on the internet. This, of course, is fairly obvious in the online space, but what we're seeing right now is that this is also manifesting itself in the physical space. The abundance of IoT sensors in everywhere we go makes it possible for these digital companies now to reach out into the physical world around us, whether that is your connected toothbrush, which records every time you brush your teeth and puts that data available somewhere in the cloud, or whether it is your doorbell and then you know exactly who actually is visiting your house at any given point in time. We could always argue about the privacy implications of all of this and have a long conversation about all of that, but all of this is actually driving towards the industrial space as well. Due to the collection of data in the private space, the price of connectivity, the price of sensors, the price of computing power, also according to the Moore's law, makes it possible to create complete digital representations of everything around us and also in the industrial space. So in the movie Matrix, people were living in a virtual world without realizing that they were living in a virtual world. They just went along with their lives, not knowing that they were actually digital representations of something in a virtual world. Today, we don't know that there is a virtual world of us that exists in these data centers and clouds of the world. We live about our lives, but we also have our digital twins in this space. And these digital twins can be used to simulate behavior, to predict behavior of what we're going to do. This similar thing now is also possible in the manufacturing space. So companies are taking perhaps a little bit notorious things that I'm talking about and using this technology now to apply that in the industrial space. So when we talk about the Industry 4.0 in context of data and sensors, we have to separate that from the consumer IoT that we just talked about. But the same technologies now can be applied to create digital representations of manufacturing space and equipment that is being produced by these manufacturing spaces. Now, the question, of course, is that, well, what does any of this have to do with banking? Well, a lot. The obvious answer, of course, is that in the consumer IoT space, we need to be able to pay for things. If these companies are creating the opportunities for us to already know what we want to do, we of course need a way to pay for that. But today we're talking about the industrial space of this new digital data economy. And when we look at the industrial space and these digital representations that I just talked about, we need a framework around that to allow us to think how do things pay for each other in these digital value chains of the future. These digital value chains, of course, need a very secure framework. We need a way for us to trust the data that is coming out of these systems. We need a way to create a secure framework and turn, for example, our know your customer processes into know your machine processes. Even though it sounds a little bit like science fiction, in the future, intelligent machines need the capability to pay each other in these systems. And we as a bank need to understand what does that mean in terms of compliance, regulation, security, and of course, trust. We are hard at work understanding these kind of basic building blocks of how do we actually make this work and how do we make the plumbing of payments work in a way where we start talking about not only making payments over a standard API, but rather we're talking about things like how do we create streams of cash in this new type of machine economy. But of course, the question is why? Why would we need robots paying each other? Why would we need any of this to happen? And we have identified one major trend in this space, which is related to everything as a service or pay-as-you-go models. So as we have seen, we are moving from a buy and operate type of an economy now largely into a subscription-based economy, which is manifested by things like us having a Netflix subscription, us having a HBO subscription or Spotify, whatever you want. But the latest trend is that this is moving into the physical space as well. Already today, you can buy a vacuum cleaner in Sweden and then pay for the amount of carpet that the machine actually vacuums instead of paying a monthly fee, for example. Then in the industrial space, which is of course interesting for us today, the industrial equipment can equally be sold as a service. This actually is not a new thing. If you look at, for example, Rolls-Royce, who has created the power by the hour concept already in the 1960s, so moved away from selling airline engines for airlines as a capital investment and move that into a service. So the airlines are paying Rolls-Royce for the miles flown instead of the actual engine. Rolls-Royce bundles services, maintenance, and everything around it, and you just pay by the mile you go. As we heard Topi today say, the airline industry today and the airplanes create massive amount of data, and now we can move from these models into infinitely more accurate usage models that we can then map into payments and financing options. Interestingly enough, if you looked at Rolls-Royce movements now lately during the COVID crisis, you notice that their results dropped significantly and they named one of the reasons for the drop to be that their power by the hour concept is no longer producing revenues because the planes are not flying at the moment. That, if something, is a manifestation of how big this business model is for these companies. Now, bringing it all together, the role of the bank, like I promised. Once we create an economy where everything is pay as you go, and you have the customer, our customer, the manufacturing company producing goods, you have the manufacturing customer using those goods. You want to create a relationship where the customer's customer pays for the equipment as a service. Our role as a bank could be, for example, to provide a digital contracting framework that allows customers and their customers to create a trusted relationship that can be then measured using IoT data and then charged in real time as the asset is being used. There are a couple of key critical requirements for this digital contracting framework. One, of course, is that it needs to be operated by somebody who is trusted player in the ecosystem, like a bank, of course, because we are regulated. And it needs to be machine readable and completely configurable. We cannot predict the types of relationships that are being created. We don't know what is the payment frequency, what are the IoT data streams that are being used. So we need a robust framework to make all of this happen. This link is missing today. We want to be there in forefront of creating these new types of digital contracting relationships as a financial institution in the Nordics. And we are already working with a number of our customers to make this a reality. Now, I wouldn't be the head of emerging technologies if I wouldn't have some kind of a technology-related reference in the end of my presentation. And of course, I have to mention that digital contracting concept has been around for a while, especially in context of blockchain applications. What we have, however, realized as we move forward in this space is that you don't actually need a blockchain for almost any of the things that we want to do in this space. And I can safely say that today our solution is 100% organic, blockchain free. With that being said, I'm happy to conclude and move on to questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Ville. I have a number of questions for you, and I would like to start with this one. What does this new data economy mean in terms of data privacy for us individuals? Wouldn't these new business models degrade our privacy? What do you think?
Excellent question, and also the reason why we feel that us as banks are in the right position to actually make this happen. Because we are a regulated entity, we all, of course, comply to existing privacy laws, and we are, of course, bound by the bank privacy regulation as well. But moreover, we also subscribe to the My Data principles, where the users own their own data. They should be giving their informed consent of exchanging their data for different kinds of services, whether that is equipment or digital services. So we want to create a fair data ecosystem and be sure that we do that in accordance with law and regulation. So you could always have an argument whether the banks are the right people to do this, but I believe that there's no better option out there at the moment.
Okay, so my next question that I've received is, if in the future everything becomes pay per use, who actually owns all these things that we use at our own convenience?
Yeah, that's another good question. Depends on the size of the asset, I would say. If, for example, a company produces something fairly low cost, a few €100 or something like that, it's not a problem for these companies to finance them themselves. They are extracting the revenues by selling this equipment as a service. There are, however, situations where the volumes of this equipment, either in terms of amounts, but the aggregate amount of the value becomes too large for the balance sheet of these manufacturing companies. And in that case, of course, we might want to use intelligent financing solutions that allow these companies to move these assets away from their balance sheets. Now, then, in a traditional world, the bank would then provide some kind of a credit line or a loan against that asset. But in the digital world, when we have an actual digital representation of the contract and we know exactly how it is being used and how often the payments are coming in, how the cash flows are working with those assets, it allows, for example, banks and other financing institutions to de-risk these processes and make them more real-time as they are being deployed. So the short answer there is that it will be owned whoever wants to own them and wants to have the low risk of financing this. In any case, it is an opportunity to add value to the ecosystem.
Okay, great. Now, it's a little bit a question in line with what you've explained. So, what is the most urgent action a Treasury Department need to take to understand the impact of changed business models like the one that you were referring to?
Yes, and this is key. When we talk to our customers, typically we talk to treasurers, we talk to the people in charge of the money. We see different kinds of conversations happening. Sometimes the treasurers are extremely well aware of what is the business model transformation and what is the state of the digitalization of operations in their own companies. And those are the best conversations we can have. If we can have a discussion with a customer who understands the need for a business model transformation and then has somebody there to support in the conversations to understand what data can we use to actually make this transformation happen, those are the best types of discussions to have. On the other side of that spectrum, of course, is the treasurer who is only concerned about the Excel balance sheet and is less aware of the digital capabilities of their companies. And there I encourage them to take a look into the digitalization efforts that are going, especially in the manufacturing and measuring of things in their own companies.
Okay, great. So my last question for you today, Ville, what do you think drives innovations? Humans or technology?
Neither. It is the creation of new business and new value. So as an engineer, I want to always believe that there is some kind of a magic technology out there that suddenly creates value out of thin air, which is, by the way, something that the cryptocurrency people still believe. But still, the value is being created from actually creating something that is useful for people. So creating new business value and then finding the right technology to deploy this new value in an efficient way is really the key of doing everything right.